We have seen Extinction Rebellion causing havoc in Australian cities, but right now they're being allowed to disrupt commuters and generally behave like lawless imbeciles in the UK. Earlier today, I spoke with Calvin Robinson about that. I also spoke to him about Boris Johnson losing his mojo, and last and least, we covered Harry and Meghan. Joining me now from the UK, political advisor, broadcaster and GB News host, Calvin Robinson. Now, Calvin, let's start with Extinction Rebellion. They've begun 2 weeks of climate protests in London, and we've got celebrities like Stephen Fry supporting the group and their lawless antics. Police have made some arrests on Tuesday, yet this structure remains in the middle of a busy intersection in Covent Gardens. The BBC reports Extinction Rebellion built a huge 13-foot table in Covent Gardens as part of its fifth mass protest to demand the government stop using fossil fuels. Calvin, why are they allowed to get away with this sort of stuff? This is just causing mass disruption.
Why indeed, Rita? If it was up to me, they would be prescribed as a terrorist organisation, because what they're doing is, well, what they always do is block access to emergency services. So ambulances, fire engines, police cars cannot get by, and people cannot get the help that they need because Extinction Rebellion think they are more important. And what's disappointing about all this is, I'm a conservative. I would be in favour of protecting our world, protecting our environment. They could win people like me over to their argument, but they don't, because they go so extreme. I don't think they realise this. And what's also disappointing is people that I've always looked up to, like Stephen Fry, an amazing orator, great actor, great presenter, come on and use their celebrity status to join the bandwagon. It's highly disappointing all round, but essentially no one's argued the case to convince people like me that man-made issues are causing this climate crisis. Climate change happens perpetually. It's constantly happening. No one's convinced me that what I do, my day-to-day life, is actually affecting the climate. Until they can convince us of that, they're on a losing battle.
But you've got to say, your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, he may have been elected in a landslide on a Conservative platform, but he's behaving like some sort of a greenie. What is behind Boris's embrace of these climate change policies? I don't even know why Extinction Rebellion is so angry. They should be championing what Boris is pushing.
That's a good question, but it's not what is behind this, it's who is behind this. As we know, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, married Carrie Symonds, now Carrie Johnson, who has always been a green eco-warrior, and this is her main issue. It seems to have become the government's main issue now, the green agenda. But what's disgusting about it is that the government are looking to put extra fees, extra taxes on the little man, on the everyman. So we, the normal folk, are going to have to pay extra, tens of thousands of pounds extra for greener cars, for greener boilers in our homes, while the elite are still able to do what they want to do. They're still able to get exemptions for their private jets. They're still able to go on holiday many times a year, for not just holidays, but for these meetings around the G7, while we're being lectured that we need to cut down on our CO2 emissions. I don't understand how the hypocrisy of it all gets past them. But essentially, Boris Johnson was elected to get Brexit done. He did that. Fantastic. The COVID pandemic has shown him to be a bit of a socialist, to be honest, where I expected him to be a stronger libertarian fighting for freedoms. He's taken freedoms away. And now, as the pandemic comes to an end, we're seeing the rise of the green agenda. That seems to be the next, climate emergency seems to be the next agenda that we're going to be losing our freedoms over. It's not acceptable. I'm hoping that we get a new leader of the Conservative Party, so we get a new Prime Minister at some point, because we've got years before the next election. And this is not the Boris Johnson that we know and love, not the Boris Johnson that we voted for.
No, and there's no opposition. The opposition is even more radical with their policies in this area. So unless the challenge comes from within the Tories, he's not going to shift, as there's no reason to. It's an astonishing situation to have such an enormous mandate to win in big landslide and then embrace policies that your opposition was essentially pushing. Now, let's move on to an issue that's personally impacted you. The academic Aisha Khanum, who was sacked from a job after calling you a vile racial slur on Twitter, is now suing the university, which cut ties with her. She claims that the dismissal discriminated against her political beliefs. Is our argument, Calvin, essentially that the anti-racists are racist and are entitled to use racist language?
I'm baffled by this, absolutely baffled. So this happened 6 months ago when she racially abused me on social media. First from her personal account, it should be noted, but secondly, the abuse came from her corporate account. And she, at the time, claimed that it wasn't her that sent it from her corporate account. But now she's claiming that she got disconnected from this university. She didn't work for them. She did some kind of liaising with this university, some consulting. They cut her off because of the racist tweets. But now she's saying that it's her protected characteristics that they're discriminating against, which would imply that she did send the tweets. Anyway, we won't discuss what she said in them, but they were highly offensive towards black people. And she's not a black person. I'm half black, half white. She happens to be Asian, but because she's on the left, it's forgiven. Now, I think if a white person said to me the things that she said, anyone would say that it was racist. But because she's an ethnic minority herself, although not black, and because she's on the left, on the critical race theory side of the argument, it's forgiven, it's acceptable. And I think it's bizarre that someone can claim that racial views or the right to hurl racial abuse at someone is a protected characteristic, because if she wins this court case and gets reinstated in her role with the university, that essentially means that any racial view is a protected characteristic, which means white supremacists, people on the very far right, so-called neo-Nazis could say, actually, our views are protected characteristics too, and we are able to call black people or anyone these horrible, racist, abusive terms that we know are not appropriate in normal everyday life. In fact, they're not appropriate anyway. There's no instance I can think of where racial abuse is acceptable from anyone. And the fact that some elements of the left seem to think that they are allowed to use these terms because they're fighting some kind of anti-racist battle just shows the cognitive dissonance at play in their mindsets, the mental gymnastics that they are jumping through these hoops in order to say, we are allowed to call you these terms because we are the good guys. It's bonkers, it's baffling. I don't know how we get away with it.
Now, we're seeing in the UK this fracture between the US and the UK, particularly over the debacle in Afghanistan. Former UK Prime Minister Theresa May said that the botched withdrawal is a major setback for British foreign policy. She also said, we boast about global Britain, but where is global Britain on the streets of Kabul? Is the former Prime Minister right, Calvin? And should the Allies have stayed in Afghanistan? They were there for 20 years. Is the argument that the withdrawal was botched and that's what they got wrong? Or is the argument they should remain in Afghanistan indefinitely?
Well, first of all, Theresa May made an awful Prime Minister, but she's making a fantastic backbencher at really holding the government to account. And like you said earlier, we have no opposition, so it's important that we get some opposition from the backbenchers. Now, where she's right is that this withdrawal has been botched. It seems to me there was no exit strategy. We knew we were leaving because the US told us back in April that we were going to leave. So I don't know why there wasn't a proper plan to first of all get civilians out and then take out the soldiers and troops. It seems to have been a complete mess from day one, and it seems rushed. And for President Joe Biden to suggest that the Taliban would not take over for Kabul, for example, he should be impeached for that. This is the biggest mistake on a global scale we've seen in a long time, in years. But regardless of that, the problem for me is that the UK and our other NATO allies should not have left. We should have put pressure on the US and said, actually, we're not ready to leave yet. It's not okay to just abandon the Afghans after we went in there to intervene. And we've been helped, we've been nation building, essentially. We've been preparing them, building up their armies, their education system, their democracy, all of this. It's not ready yet. But the problem here is that we seem to think we can go into these countries in the Middle East, teach them a thing or two, and then leave them to it. That does not work. What would have happened in the olden days is we would have made Afghanistan a territory of the British Empire and assisted with their parliamentary democracy, assisted with their education system, and maintained a presence in that country for years to come. Even post-empire, we did this in Germany. We stayed in Germany for a long, long time to make sure that the country was fit for purpose post-war. We can't just jump into these countries, do a thing or two, and leave them to it, because look at what's happening to the poor Afghani people now. The women and children are going to get murdered and raped. Villages are going to get pillaged. Men are going to get assassinated if they were on the wrong side of the argument. It's just barbaric. It's totally barbaric, and it's our fault. A lot of it's our fault because we went in there and we've abandoned them, we've neglected them. There's an argument to be made about whether we should have gone in there in the first place or not, but that's done now. We did. So now we have to look at what we do going forward. It's not okay for us to just abandon them. If the US is saying they don't want to be interventionist anymore, they want to be America first, which is ironic. Joe Biden has to be America first after arguing that Trump was too America first. But if America does not want to stand up and be the global police that they've been for the last few centuries, then we, the rest of the West, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, Germany, France, need to stand up and say, okay, well, we will do it. We will make sure that we'll protect these people. And we're not doing that yet. But in order to do that, we need to rebuild our military might. We need to make sure that we are a force to be reckoned with. The United Kingdom is still, fourth biggest country in the world, GDP-wise. We offer services to the entire world, financial services. We have a soft power in the BBC, in the World Service, not necessarily the domestic service, but we are respected and renowned across the world. But we don't have the military presence that we used to have. That's something that we need to put money back into. Forget spending all this money on foreign aid that goes to corrupt regimes. What we need to do is put our money back into our defence, back into our military, so that we can have not just a soft power, but a strong military presence around the world to protect civilians, to protect democracy, to protect our way of life.
Well said, Calvin. And finally, I'm loath to bring this up, but we've got to talk a little bit about the Sussexes, because you had an interesting take on the whole controversy of the mystery royal who supposedly made a racist comment, wondering what Archie was going to look like. And we still don't. Do we know who that mystery royal is now? And please tell us your take on that entire controversy.
The later did say that it wasn't Her Majesty the Queen, it wasn't His Royal Highness Prince Philip. But then they're coming out in the press this week or last week saying that Her Majesty hasn't taken full ownership of the race debacle. Well, how could she take full ownership of something that she wasn't privy to or involved in? That's a really weird stance. But again, it's just dragging Her Majesty down. But the problem here is that, of course, this was going to be a conversation to be had. I've said many times, I'm from a mixed race family myself, black father, white mother, and I know full well that both them and my grandparents had conversations before I was born, wondering how dark or light I was going to be, just out of pure curiosity, because we'd never had that mix in our family before. But likewise, they would have asked what colour my eyes were going to be, how tall I was going to be. I'm actually 6'4". I came out quite tall. But all of these conversations would have been had. Likewise, in the royal family, they might have asked whether the child would come out ginger. Or how light or dark skin would be. That's not racist. We're allowed to have conversations like this, but this is the point, isn't it? We're not anymore. People will say bringing up race is racist. Of course it's not. Anyone can have a conversation about race, and this is another issue. They say white people can't talk about race. Now, anyone can talk about race, and as long as you're not being racially abusive, you're not being derogatory about it. It's very clear. Why are we confused about this these days?
It's a discussion that we're going to keep on having until Meghan and Harry tell us who the mystery royal was, because the whole family is right now tainted as racist. Calvin Robinson, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Cheers, Rita. God bless.